Read you. Hello, hello, my brothers and sisters. This is Garrett Bake, your brother in arms, and welcome to another episode of The Tactical Businessman. Today's topic is your mind a weapon or a weakness? I want to share a little story with you. Back when I was first accepted onto the SWAT team, I thought, woohoo, I made it. I'd spent a year working really hard, working to make myself physically fit to an extreme level, becoming an expert shooter, learning new tactics and techniques, all these things that were necessary in order for me to become a member of the SWAT team. Well, all that guaranteed me was, congratulations, here you are. Now let's see what you can do. And I had to go through about a year to a year and a half worth of additional training. Now, when you think about that, you start to consider why it is that these SWAT teams are so elite. Like, these guys spend hours upon hours upon hours training. Well, one of the things that I had to learn how to use was called an SCBA, a self-contained breathing apparatus. Now, this self-contained breathing apparatus, the coolest thing about it was that you could literally strap it on, throw it on your mouth, and you could breathe whatever it was, whatever the oxygen level was, whatever hazards were in the air, chemicals, like it didn't matter, you could still breathe, right? In other words, think of strapping on a scuba tank onto your back, right? This is what the firefighters use. And so as part of this training, we had to go into the pool, which if you've ever heard me talk about water and I don't get along very well. So that was an interesting experience. But also we had to go into the Phoenix Fire Department, into their training center, if you will, and we had to go through certain scenarios. Now, all this, I didn't understand it at the time, right? And so all this, I'm like, oh, okay, I can get through this. And I remember having to jump into the water with, just my swimming shorts and this breathing apparatus into the deep end and walk. And I'm stressing out because I'm not sure if I'm going to get oxygen or not. And I have to trust this equipment that I have. And we have people splashing water in my face. And we have all these things happening at the same time, right? All meant to what? It's all meant to help me become more accustomed to this apparatus, to trust it more, to learn how to use it, and ultimately to become more focused on the task that is at hand, instead of having to worry about the equipment that I'm carrying at the time. So as part of this, again, we had to go to the Phoenix Fire training facility and go through some different scenarios, one of which was walking through smoke-filled rooms, which was a little difficult because you couldn't see, but with the breathing apparatus, I could still breathe, and I had my weapon in my hand, and although I couldn't see as far in front of myself as I wanted to, I was still able to move around really easily. But the second part was the hardest part, and that part required some things that I was not very comfortable with. So they had for lack of a better description, they had a big concrete tube. And it looked like a snake, kind of came around almost in a complete circle, but more in a square shape. And they told us that in order to graduate, in order to be certified with this self-contained breathing apparatus, we had to go in one side and come out the other. Sounds easy enough, right? But of course, then the details come out. One, you can't use any light. And two, you have to take your SCBA, your self-contained breathing apparatus, with you. So I remember thinking, okay, like I got this will be easy. No problem. Like, let's do this. And as I got on my hands and knees, because this was small, right? And I hunched down and they said, hey, listen, like there's going to be some obstacles in there. Just take your time and work your way through them. And the instructor was super calm, and I was like, all right, cool. Like, I got this. And so I remember getting in, and I could kind of crouch when I started, and then I had to get down on my hands and knees, and it started to get dark, and then I couldn't see anything anymore, and I'm crawling on my hands and knees, and then my tank that's on my back, the tank starts scraping against the top of this tube, of this tunnel. And so what happens is I end up having to go to my belly. And so now I'm low crawling, right? Low crawling on my elbows, moving my way forward. Well, it starts to get smaller and smaller. And I'm not having a lot of space to move. Like it literally gets to this place where like I'm moving what seems like an inch or two at a time. I can't really use my legs. I'm kind of moving arms and then pulling forward. Use my arms and then pulling forward. And I'm starting to realize that I'm panicking a little bit. Like my breathing is getting really hard. I can't see a thing. Like it's dark. And of course, then the story started in my mind, right? Like, am I going to get stuck? Am I going to be able to get out of here? All these things. And I'm like, no. I got this. I'm good. So I keep crawling down this tube and I get to this point where I feel in front of me and I feel some wires. Like it starts to open up a little bit, but I feel some wires and I'm like, damn it. I have to get past these wires. So I'm like, okay, how am I going to do this? So I start to kind of try and lift the wires over me and kind of crawl through. Well, what eventually happens? Well, I get stuck in these wires and it's pitch black. I'm stuck in these wires and I literally cannot move. So what happens is I start to panic. Like my breathing accelerates, my heart rate jumps through the roof and I'm like I just can't get enough oxygen and I'm panicking and I'm freaking out. And just at that moment, the instructor lifts up what was like a little hatch above me and the light comes pouring in. He looks at me. He's like, hey, you all right? I was like, no, not at all. Like, get me the hell out of here. He's like, well, I can get you out or you can keep going. And I was like, fuck. I was like, all right, let's keep going. So he's like, hey, listen, like move this wire here and do this here and then keep going through. And so I continued. He closed the hatch. It got dark again. I made it through the wires, get to this wooden, this piece of plywood basically. And I get up about halfway on it and then it flips on me. Whoop, it leans forward and I start to slide down. And it was crazy, right? I'm in the dark and all these things are going on and panicking. I'm like, I got this. And just when it seemed like all in my mind, all hope was lost, I start to see a light in front of me. And as I start to crawl more towards it, I'm now able to get on my hands and knees. And then eventually I get to the entrance and I'm able to get out. And I remember how, quote unquote, traumatizing that was to me at the time, to be in that confined space and not be comfortable. Like I didn't even know until that point that I was claustrophobic. Apparently I am. But I was like, man, why do we have to go through that? I'm never going to be in a situation like that. Or so I told myself. See, but here's the truth. The truth is that there was a purpose behind all of that. And it wasn't to make all the rookie SWAT guys panic, hyperventilate, pass out, quit. No, it was to try and start to train us into this idea that your mind can either be a weapon or it can be a weakness. And he who trains his mind to be a weapon usually comes out on top. And so this is what they were trying to do, was to train our minds to be weapons. Now I would go through different scenarios and different experiences farther down in my career. And I realized that my willingness to put myself in that situation helped to sharpen my mind, helped to make it more of a weapon instead of a weakness. And here's the interesting thing, is that most businessmen, yourself included, struggle with this same thing. See, at work, they have this mind that's a weapon. It's very sharp. They're really good at sales. They're really good at systems. They're really good at marketing. All of these things are really good at, right? And they excel at it. But then they're put in a new environment, an environment where they're not completely comfortable with, an environment where their mind has not been sharpened yet. And what happens? They start to panic. They start to freak out. They want to call it quits. They want to give up. They hyperventilate. Now, what kind of environment am I talking about? Well, there's a couple. One of those for you could be the gym, working out, where you're literally hyperventilating because you haven't worked out in 15 years. You tell yourself you can do it and you can't, and you start to freak out and you start to panic, and then you're like, I'm done. I quit. I'm not doing this. Or for many of you, this is actually the truth. When it comes to your relationship with your wife and your kids. Yep, I'm talking to you. How do I know this? How is it that I can say this? See, because this was me for so many years. Like I was that guy who was super elite when it came to, clearing a room with a weapon and showing up and dealing with the bad guy and the criminals. And I was elite when it came to what I did for work. Elite. I'd been trained. My mind was a weapon. But at home, my mind was a weakness. I hadn't been trained. I hadn't spent the time training. I had no one that had guided me, no one that had shown me what to do. And so I would get into these situations where I'd feel like I was trapped in a tube, caught in some wires, and what? Hey, open up the hatch, get me out of here. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. This is not working for me. This is not what I signed up for. I want to quit. And so I ask you, what do you do when these situations happen? What do you do when you get to a place in your relationship or with your body or somewhere outside of work where things aren't happening the way you want them to? Do you start to panic? Do you start to freak out? Do you lash out in anger? Like, which one is it? See, for me, it kind of depended on the situation, but I would use all of them. Like, sometimes I would lash out in anger. Sometimes it would be frustration. Sometimes it would be fear. But regardless, it was all centered around one thing. And that was my inability to train my mind to be a weapon instead of a weakness. See, the reason that I was able to stay calm under pressure when the real world scenarios happened when I was on the SWAT team was because the amount of training that I did, which was usually a minimum of 10 hours a week. 10 hours a week. Are you listening? 40 hours a month. 40. How much time do you spend a week on your body? How much time do you spend a week investing with your wife and your children? And it don't mean sitting down in front of the TV eating popcorn watching a Disney movie. Although that's cool, and yes, sometimes you can do that, but actually investing in them, actually building that relationship, actually strengthening your mind so that when your daughter comes at you and tells you she hates you, you don't freak out. Or when your wife is pissed off at you because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing as a husband and father, you don't want to storm out and call it quits. So I invite you to consider that in your life right now, there are areas, probably in business for most of you, where your mind is a weapon and you feel comfortable in that space, which is why when things aren't working, you always run to that space. It's like a safe place for you. You run away to it. To the office, sure, I hate my computer. Sure, I hate my phone. Sure, I hate my camera. But that's where I feel safe. Because you don't know how to react and you don't know how to act in your personal life. So how is it that we make our mind become a weapon at home? Our mind become a weapon with our body? Well, there's only one way to do that, and that's called reps. Reps, 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 reps. You have to put yourself in that scenario over and over and over again and not run away from it, but you literally practice in it. You become better at it. In other words, the first time that you argue with your wife about sex, about money, about the kids, it's not going to go so well. And you're going to want to do what you normally do, which is run away. Or you can sit there and go, okay, what do I really want? And you start working at it. And it's not going to turn out right the first time, or the second time, or the third time, or the fourth time. It's going to take lots of times. And even after lots of times, you're still going to suck at it sometimes. But you keep going at it. My wife and I, we've been together, 23 years, coming on 23 years. And we still argue and fight like we did this last week. But because of the reps that we've built, my mind is a weapon and so is hers. So we know, okay, it's a little dull. Time to sharpen it up. So I invite you this week to take some time. Take some time to figure out where it is that your mind is a weakness and not a weapon. And then start to invest time and energy into making it a weapon. All right, that's all I got for you today. If you want more information, you know where to go, thetacticalbusinessman.com. If you want some free tools, go to winthedailywar.com. Listen, this is all about you, getting you what you want out of life. If you have any questions, issues, problems, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always willing to have a conversation. All right. On that note, stay safe, and we'll see you on the next one.